everybody, and welcome back to Autumn Leigh at Home. I'm Autumn Leigh, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to make pumpkin pasta using leftovers that we had left over from the pasta bar from our Christmas party, as well as a sourdough loaf of bread. Please follow along and we'll go ahead and get started. To do a sourdough loaf of bread, you want to get started with a fed sourdough starter. So this is what a fed sourdough starter looks like. It looks nice and bubbly. Fed means that you fed it flour and water into the starter 6 to 12 hours before, and it had a chance to ferment and start getting all bubbly on top. So that's what that looks like. This recipe calls for 200 grams of sourdough starter that's fed, 450 grams of bread flour, 250 grams of filtered water. I just used tap water and mine turned out just fine. 1/4 cup of honey, maple syrup or sugar. I used honey in this one. 2 tablespoons of oil, 2 teaspoons of unrefined salt, and 1 egg plus 1 teaspoon of water scrambled into the egg for the egg wash. If you don't have a sourdough starter, that is okay. I can post in the description below another recipe that's fantastic that we've always used for a crusty loaf of bread that my family absolutely loves. So I'll post that in the description as well as this recipe. That way you can choose from either one if you want to follow along. Right now, I know sourdough starters can be very daunting to get started or even use, but they are a lot simpler than you think they are once you get started and once you get in there. Again, just having that mindset of learning one new thing at a time. I know I've said that a billion times in my other videos, but learning one new thing at a time really is helpful. And that's what I've learned with the sourdough starter. It was a lot scarier with the unknown than it was just to once I got started and was able to start using it and cooking with it. And I did simple things at first, like waffles and crackers. And then I kind of veered more towards the loaves of bread. This was my first loaf of bread that we've really done that's been very successful. I haven't really had any issues with this, except for the only thing that I will say for this one was you'll see at the end, I will compare how long you allow it to rise with another loaf of bread that I used the exact same recipe, but I doubled the amount of time I allowed it to rise. So I'll show you that towards the end. To get started on the sourdough loaf of bread, just mix all of the ingredients, let it knead in the mixer for a little while. You see me taking it out and I'm testing it to see if it's kneaded long enough. You want to go for a window pane effect. That means when you pull it up and you stretch it, you don't want to see it start breaking apart. And here you can see it is breaking apart, so it's not ready yet. You want to be able to pull it and it be elastic and almost see vining in it and it not break apart. So it's not ready yet. We'll go ahead and put it back on the mixer and let it knead more. If you don't have a stand mixer, then you can also knead it on the counter. It just takes longer and you need a lot of muscle to do it that way. On this day, we were taking down Christmas decorations and we had so many leftovers from our parties, and I was trying to be really creative and use up these leftovers. I know a lot of people and a lot of homesteaders and YouTube channels are doing the pantry challenge. I am not confident enough in my pantry to be able to do a full 2 months of pantry challenge. I know Jessica at Three Rivers Homestead does that with her channel, and she's inspired so many people to utilize January and February to be creative and create their own rules and do a pantry challenge. Unfortunately, I'm not confident enough. However, I will say it has inspired me to utilize what I have and try to use those leftovers and use what we have in the pantry to create other meals. So therefore, that's why I am doing today the pumpkin pasta, as well as the sourdough bread. Now, the sourdough bread I'm creating today. However, we had leftover garlic spread that I had made from scratch for the pasta bar, and I wanted to utilize that, so that's why we're doing the garlic bread, as well as I had pumpkin puree and chicken broth and all of those things already made from scratch in the freezer that I could utilize to add to what we had leftovers from the pasta bar and create a whole new meal. So that's what inspired me to do that today. Here you see that I am doing my stretch and folds. The recipe calls for us to try to do that 4 times every 30 minutes for 4 times. And I was not exactly on time with all of these. However, I got 4 folds in and then I allowed it to rise. Now, by the time dinner rolled around, it was not a full 6 hours, I don't believe, or it may have been only about 6, 7 hours at most by the time from start to finish of me making this. And I would strongly recommend allowing a much longer rise time. And you'll see why when I show you the other bread. I know pumpkin pasta may not be everybody's cup of tea, and this may not be everybody's idea of a great dinner. I just wanted to use this as an inspiration for you guys to inspire you to utilize leftovers that you may already have from your previous meals that you can recreate, and maybe go kitchen shopping instead of going to the grocery store first. Shop through your refrigerator or your pantry and be inspired with what you may already have available, and that will save you time and effort and money as well as utilize the leftovers so you have less waste. For this dinner, the only thing I didn't have available already in my pantry or refrigerator was Parmesan cheese. I had some available, but that was the only thing I ended up needing to go get at the grocery store, and I was already going to the grocery store for our weekly trip that I do, and so I went ahead and picked that up while I was there. Everything else we already had available for this meal. I didn't have to buy anything extra, so that again was an entire meal that I was able to make from dinner for the cost of one pack of Parmesan, which we are currently shredding. My son wanted to help, so he is doing the dicing or the mincing of our garlic and onion as well as our Parmesan. Once we got those prepped, we set them aside. That way we could get started on our bread. And I didn't want to start the sauce until we were further along with the bread. So I got the bread bowl and I poured it out onto a lightly floured surface and separated it into 2 loaves. This batch makes 2 loaves, and I made 2 more loaves after this. And the first loaf, this one, I did not allow it to rise as much as I did the second one, and you can definitely tell once I pulled it out of the oven. Now, it still tasted fantastic. We didn't have any issues with the taste or the texture. However, I like it a lot more fluffy than this one turned out, but that's okay because we were in a hurry this day, and I wanted to make sure that I had it done in time for dinner, and it still tasted fine, especially with the garlic spread on top, so I'm not worried about it. But if you were to make this, I would strongly recommend a long rise time. That definitely made a big difference, as well as here you see that I'm folding the dough. The second time around, I rolled the dough, and that may not seem like a big difference, but I don't know, between that and the rise time increase, that the second loaf turned out a lot puffier. It rose a lot more. It just looked a lot prettier. So I would encourage maybe rolling the dough, which means you just start at one long end and roll all the way to the other, and then tucking the sides in, spraying your pan down with nonstick spray, and then putting the 2 loaves on there. I preheated my oven to 400 degrees. And once it goes in, the cook time is technically 17 to 20 minutes. I put mine in for about 16 minutes, and it turned out golden brown and was not too overdone. Before we put it in the oven, I did let it rise for another hour or two. Again, the longer you can let it rise, the better. I did not turn my oven on here just now. That's just it. It's a lot warmer in there, and because I had cooked something earlier today and it was still a little bit warm, so it allowed it to proof some more. But the longer you can let it proof, the better. The recipe I used for the pumpkin pasta sauce came from dinnerthendessert.com. It starts off, and I did not go exactly by this recipe. Again, of course, I veered off a little bit. I wanted my sauce to be a little bit more creamy than this one called for, so I added a lot more Parmesan. I added that whole block or whole wedge of Parmesan once it was shredded, as well as doubled the whipping cream, or the heavy cream that this recipe called for. So this recipe called for 1 pound of pasta, which again, I had the leftover pasta, of one small onion finely chopped, 2 cloves of garlic minced, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 cups of pumpkin puree, which we had previously done, and I will add that video on the end. That way, if you want to learn how to make your own pumpkin puree, you can see that, as well as 2 cups of chicken broth, which again, I also made a video for, and I can add that on to the end. 2 cups of chicken broth, 1/4 cup of heavy cream, and I doubled that, 1/2 cup of sour cream, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley minced, and 1/4 cup of Parmesan, which I probably tripled, if not quadrupled that one, because I wanted it a lot thicker of a sauce. Once I mixed all of these ingredients, I went ahead and brought this up to a boil, like just a slow, quick boil, and then brought it down to a simmer, and then added leftover Italian sausage that we had from the pasta bar, as well as leftover pasta. The great thing about cooking from your kitchen and utilizing what you have is you can make these recipes your own. Unlike baking, cooking, you can always add or take away any ingredients that you either like the taste of, don't like the taste of, or what you happen to already have at the house. This is what the first batch of bread looks like after 16 minutes, and we took it out of the oven. See how it's still rose and it still looks great. It still tasted great. However, this is the second batch. See how much more rise I got out of it. And that's by allowing it to rise for multiple more hours. And then even that second rise that I put it in the oven for, allowing it to rise again for a little bit longer than 2 hours that time too. It just gave it a lot more of a fluff up and rose way better than this loaf did. But still, this one turned out great. So just kind of whatever works out great. Either one, they were homemade and made from scratch and tasted fantastic. So just learning from our mistakes and learning one thing at a time as we move forward. Now I know that allowing it to rise that extra time is actually pretty important. Leftover from the pasta bar, we also had leftover homemade garlic spread that I used, and I can put that recipe down in the description as well. But this spread was delicious. If you heat it up in the microwave, it makes it even softer, and then you can almost use it as a dip because it had Parmesan in it, it had Italian seasonings, garlic powder, and butter, and it was phenomenal. We all loved it and ate it again the other night. So we used it again this evening and it worked out great because we are again using something that I didn't have to go to the store for, and it was homemade. Once I was done putting the spread on the bread, I put it back in the oven on broil to allow it to get that crispy edges that taste so good with the butter on it. And it was time to pull out our leftover pasta and sausage. Again, this is stuff that was already pre-made that we had left over, and I didn't want to throw it out. I wanted to be able to utilize it. So this is what we're putting in the pumpkin pasta. The Italian sausage was a little bit of a different taste with the pasta sauce, the pumpkin pasta sauce. I'm not sure if I would use sausage again. However, it wasn't bad. It was just a little bit different. So maybe utilizing a different meat or even just doing the pasta itself. It tasted a lot like fettuccine Alfredo, but with a little bit of a different spin to it. This had mixed reviews with my family. Half of my family absolutely loved it, and the other half, it was not their favorite. They ate it, but it wasn't their favorite. That tends to be what happens with my family, though. We often have it split down the middle. We just have very different taste buds in our family. Half of my family typically likes stuff, and the other half doesn't, and that's completely okay. I cook one meal every day. I don't do different meals for each person. So this is what we were having for today. And again, everybody ate it just fine. And then the other half absolutely loved it. So it was a win in my book, I feel, especially for utilizing leftovers. I hope this inspired you guys. And I want to say thank you so much for watching this channel. Please come back. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I hope to see you next time.